Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dark Pixel Podcast. My name is Mike.
My name's Kason. And I just want to say,
go ahead.
Isn't this just a great podcast?
Like I love this podcast.
Isn't it a good podcast?
I love this podcast.
Just kind of like you get all the news for the whole week and you just come to one place and you just kind of talk about it with other people who also followed that same news that week.
I know. People who talk about the same things.
It's almost
come and talk about those things. It's a lot of fun. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. A couple things. First of all, I changed how I'm doing the little intro there. Was it better? Did it skip? I won't know until I watch this again.
We'll see in a couple hours.
I think it's going to work a lot better, so we can keep our little chill tune when we get started. And we're missing Mario jumping, but that's okay. We'll be all right. On top of that, next week, one of our most requested return guests ever will be with us. We're gonna have Lore Runner return to the podcast. Next Tuesday. So
I can't wait.
For anyone who wants to send us any questions for Lore Runner, or topics you'd like us to discuss with him, let us know in the comments. Let us know on Discord. Let us know on Twitter. Let us know on Patreon. I'll put a post up for that on Patreon. But look forward to that. He's going to be back next week. So think about stuff you would like us to discuss with him. As for our topics for this week, our very first one is going to be talking about how Netflix screwed up The Witcher.
Well, hold on now. Hold on.
I mean,
by the way, somebody is saying in the comments that it didn't skip, so...
Yay, it worked. I figured it out.
Thanks, Otaku.
It's not going to be a huge distraction from now on. Okay, so Henry Cavill.
Cavill.
Also known as Superman, also known as that guy who was next to Tom Cruise in that last Mission Impossible movie.
He was actually pretty cool in that movie.
He did a good job. He was a beast.
He did great. He threw that guy through a mirror. That was
a good fight scene. I liked that fight scene.
That was really good, actually.
Anyways, he's been cast as Geralt of Rivia in the upcoming Netflix series The Witcher. Okay, so let's
super handsome.
Yeah, okay.
Very middle built. Yeah.
Dude McGuy let me know about this earlier today and wanted us to discuss our thoughts on this casting. So
yes, thank you, Dude McGuy.
There are two approaches to this I'll take. First approach I'll take is my gut reaction, my initial response as a fan of the game and the novels and just the character. I think it's terrible casting. I think it's really bad.
Superman is Geralt.
So
we talked last week about how you really like to see brand new faces.
Yes, that's
you don't
part
like
of the
to
reason.
think of someone, especially freaking Superman. You don't want someone really famous to be playing a role in a spot where you're supposed to have no preconceived ideas about what's going on. So that's a problem.
So, okay. So, you're right. Touching back on what I said last week, and this was part of the question as well. I don't like it when super huge movie stars that play iconic roles like Luke Skywalker, which is unfortunate because I think Mark Hamill...
It messes their career, yeah.
Right, but he has found his place in voice acting, which is tremendous.
He's quite good at it, yeah.
Because he has shown his range as an actor, but when his face is unattached and you can't see that, he sort of just melts into the character and shows his skill. So... But when we're talking about live action, anytime I see Mark Hamill's face, I just immediately think Luke Skywalker, and because of that iconic role he played, right? There are other, I think, big movie stars who have done tons and tons of different roles where you don't necessarily see them as a particular character, iconic character, but the actor can kind of melt into those roles as well. But I think that's rare. I think that Daniel Day-Lewis is an actor like that.
Yes.
Where sometimes you don't recognize him. He's just like really like in Lincoln, for instance, versus seeing him in like There Will Be Blood or Gangs of New York or something like that. Like he really transforms into a different character every time, and he's a huge movie star. So like that's very rare to see, and I think it's fair to say that Henry Cavill is not that kind of character actor, or at least from what I've seen him in. However, and this is where I'm going to take the other approach, right? One thing we always have stressed as we've talked about, you know, adaptions of things or remakes of games or whatever, is that there you can look at this not as what maybe your vision, personal vision of this character is, or even what the CD Projekt Red's version of this character is, right? As in like this Netflix live action adaptation needs to be faithful to that. You can kind of see it as like this is a new production team. It's their vision of this story. It's not even Andrei Sapkowski's, the original author's vision of it. It's cool to see different takes on the same story and see how other people sort of view it, and you can kind of look at it as an interesting sort of just like version or a new look at what how someone else sees this character, how someone else sees this world, how someone else sees these stories. And from that perspective, I feel like I will be able to watch it with kind of a blank slate and sort of see what they do with it. See what Henry Cavill can do with that character, with that role, what he sees in that, and what he can bring that's unique to that role. You know, I think if you look at it that way, it doesn't mean I'm going to like it. It doesn't mean I'm going to agree with them or that I see the character working with the vision that they have. But I still think that as somebody who's a huge fan, who has like a certain idea or certain vision of what this world is like and what this character is like, that's one way you can approach it to where you can mitigate maybe some of the things that you don't agree with. That being said, I will also flip back and say, he just doesn't look like him at all. Like, not at all. And I'm going to pull up an image here to sort of like show this off, right? So I have an image here from Google that shows them side by side. And I think the biggest thing for me is that Geralt's facial features are very sharp. And like Henry Cavill's the very classically handsome American boy look with a square jaw and like a little bit of a rounder nose and big round eyes. And Geralt's got like very like almost like slits for eyes, like snake-like. His nose is very long and sharp. His jaw is very like sharp and angled. It's not that it isn't square, but it's not nearly as square as Henry Cavill's is. He just doesn't look anything freaking like him. And there's this mock-up right here that somebody did that really shows how weird it is. Where he's got like the beard and like the gray hair and the scar. But his nose, especially, is just like too wide and too round. It just looks absolutely wrong to me. Doesn't look even close to right. And so I think it's a really bad casting just from a look perspective. Now, touching back on what we talked about last week, I know exactly why they did this. And that is because he's a big, famous movie star.
Gotta sell the movie.
And the fact that his name is attached means more people will watch it. Yeah. Like, that's guaranteed. It's fetching guaranteed. Henry Cavill, I know that guy. I'll watch it and see what's up in that. More people will watch it because of big, famous movie stars attached. So, from a business perspective, it's probably the right move. It'll be more successful because of it.
Yeah.
But I don't like it from an artistic perspective. I don't think it's a good choice.
No, I don't either. I would say there's probably worse choices than him specifically. It kind of tells you the direction they're going to take this, though. Like Henry Cavill Henry Cavill.
I have no idea how to pronounce his name.
He's built, dude. He's freaking like ripped like crazy. And this is going to be an action movie. It's going to be like straight up an action movie, which is, some people may like it, some people won't. I remember back in years ago, I was thinking, like, how many people want The Legend of Zelda to be made into a film, right? And then, generally speaking, most people who are familiar with the franchise would say, "Oh, that'd be awesome," right? But I say, "Hold on, I'm not done with my scenario yet." Jake Gyllenhaal is Link, and Megan, or who's the girl from Transformers?
Megan Fox.
Megan Fox is Zelda, and Nicolas Cage is the old sage. Anyways, now do you want to watch that movie? And the thing is, some people will still raise their hand to be like, whatever, I just want a Zelda movie, right? And that's fine. There will always be those kinds of people. But the thing that we all have in mind when we say we want a movie based on this video game is never the same thing that Hollywood has in mind when they say, let's make a movie based on this video game. It's always very different, and very rarely will they actually overlap. So that's just the unfortunate truth. I never saw the Assassin's Creed, or I don't see most of these video game movies that come out. I just don't. I don't care. And I prefer it that way, honestly. But as much as I want a movie to be made, it's almost like I just want to make that movie. I want to be the one to make it. And if I'm not making it, I actually don't want it. I don't want to watch it. I don't care if it exists at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that, the pressure to attach a big name to it.
Oh, so some people are saying it's actually a TV series.
Oh, it's a Netflix series. So
it's a series.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that it'll be kind of like what they did with Lost in Space. Did you ever watch the Lost in Space series on Netflix?
Not the series. I saw the movie. But
so the series that the Netflix original series, Lost in Space. I think it was 9 or 10 episodes long. I can't remember. But it sort of sets it up, and it's one of those things where it's if it's successful, they'll do another season for sure, and if not, then it'll kind of be a one-off thing. And I think it was fairly successful, so they're planning another one. I think it'll probably be something like that, where they'll give it a 10-episode first run, and depending on how that does, there's so many freaking stories of The Witcher they can dig into and explore. But
it's actually based on the books, not the game.
Oh, I'm sure it will be, yeah. Because there's just so much more you can do.
Good, once again.
With that, yeah.
So in that sense, maybe he doesn't have to look like the video game character Geralt, right? Because that's somebody's interpretation of that work.
Here's somebody in the comments mentioned Mads Mikkelsen.
Oh, Mads Mikkelsen,
yeah. So he, I think, would be a great casting, because Geralt is not supposed to be this super handsome dude, right? In The Witcher 3, the video game, they definitely made him better looking, I think. But he sort of evolved from a really weird, strange looking dude in The Witcher 1 to slightly better looking but still kind of whack to super chiseled handsome looking guy in The Witcher 3. But he has had his body mutated. His skin is pasty white. His hair is pasty white. He's got scars all over his face. He's not supposed to be a good looking dude. And I don't know. There was a certain look that Mads Mikkelsen has, and I think this is true, that he's kind of typecast as a villain. Mads Mikkelsen is.
Yeah, because of his appearance.
Yeah, because of his sharp facial features, which are usually associated with villains, and Geralt is kind of like an anti-hero, right? So I don't know. It's the casting just doesn't make any sense from just an appearance standpoint. He just does not look right. He's way too classically Superman handsome, and it's just weird. But
here we are complaining about
oh shoot! Hold on, I'm losing you, Kason. Hold on.
The main.
Crap, I lost him. Okay, he'll be back. Anyways, I'm not a fan of this casting at all, but that being said, I'm still willing to watch it when it comes out. I think that Kason might have had hit something the nail on the head a little bit with what he was saying, that they'll probably focus more on action. I mean, that's speculation. given like Henry Cavill's background, like what he's been in. That doesn't necessarily mean it will go that direction, but casting him as like a physical guy who's done a lot of action roles before could suggest that they want him to do a lot of stunts and have it be sort of action heavy. And if it is based on the books, that choice doesn't make a lot of sense to me because the books are very much like rooted in philosophy, a lot of dialogue, and I don't know, like it's not like an action heavy series. The novels aren't. So I don't really get that. And it makes me wonder about whether that is true, whether they are going to be really like basing it in the books, or whether they're going to try and spin it and do their own thing, like their own original story with the character. I don't know. I do not know. But in any case, I thought I saw Dude McGuy mention that a little bit earlier today, and I wanted to touch on it because, as most of you know, I'm a huge fan of The Witcher, and I don't know, man. I don't know. It just looks so wrong to me. But I'm gonna give it a chance. Chocolate Rob here. Talking about running the emulation of Kaysen. That was a joke from a couple weeks ago for those of you who were there for that. Okay, let's move on to our next topic here. This one was suggested by Sir Spur on Patreon. I'll read his full question here, but he wants us to touch on indie games, their role in the industry, Nintendo, and sort of how they're, with the Nindies direct that they did last week with all the indie games that are coming to the Switch. And kind of like our overall thoughts on AAA games. I'm combining this question a little bit with one from Hat89 as well. But this is what Sir Spur said. He said, what is your overall take on indie games and their role in the video gaming industry? Since the release of the Nintendo Switch, we've been seeing an increasing amount of indie titles being released on consoles. Recently, Nintendo offered a slew of indie game releases for the rest of this year and early 2019 at the Nintendo Switch Indie Showcase. We talked about it a little bit last week. That said, do you think Nintendo is making a move to appeal to indie gamers and or influenced by Steam's business model via the fact a lot of those games, if not all of them, are also on Steam? Bonus question with the above in mind, do you think Nintendo is also making a move to appeal to PC gamers as a whole? Or am I looking too much into this? Okay, so I'll get to the angle on this hat in just a minute. Kaysen's back. Welcome back. So I was actually talking to you about this just a few hours ago. Because I covered Hyper Light Drifter this week. I put up a video on Hyper Light Drifter on Monday. If you guys have not seen it, go watch it. I was really happy with the way that the video turned out. But as I was playing that game and researching it and covering it, there was just like a certain like passion that sort of just like bled into that I felt when I played it and that I saw when I was looking into the development history of it and like Alex Preston's history as like the creator of the game and everything. Like that just like was contagious. It just like I felt like how much heart and passion that they put into that project. And it's something that like you don't always see in AAA games because they're so kind of like we talked about last week with Hollywood. They play it safe because there's a lot of money going into them. Their team sizes balloon out of control because they are so huge and they need so many people, and like there's so many people with different ideas, and I think a lot of times things can get a bit messy or like things don't always gel well together, or they play it so safe that they just sort of copy paste features that are really popular or that are trendy at the time into their game if they don't really fit. Open world being like a big one recently, and a lot of the things that come with open world gaming, features that come with open world games. So I posted that video, and there were a ton of people in comments who said, have you tried this game? Have you tried this game? Have you tried this game? I looked into every single one of them, and they looked freaking sweet. They were all like these really cool indie games, And I just like have all this desire right now to just sort of like jump into the indie scene and just like, and for the most part, those are games made by people who, they're passionate about gaming. They don't have a lot of money. They can take risks, and they're just doing it because they love it and they have this great idea. Now, that being said, those are the best of indie games. I'm sure there are tons of indie projects that have like almost no effort put into them, and they just like throw them on Steam Early Access. And there's a lot of problems on Kickstarter with people trying to like start Kickstarters and not delivering on them. I've talked about Cologian in the past as a game that I backed that never saw the light of day. There's a lot of problems in that world too. But I'm starting to like really like the idea of these passionately made indie games that sort of call back to a time when we were growing up playing. And I think that for a lot of us that are, older now, that grew up on the Super Nintendo and the PlayStation 1 and the N64, like we miss when games were made that way. And like even the franchises that have carried over all the way till now, like sometimes we just lament and want to go back to the way it was. And I think that playing a game like Hyper Light Drifter, games made in that vein, it can sort of satisfy that part of me that's looking for that style, that kind of game, and that I can avoid sort of like the corporate attitude that's sort of like taken over a lot of AAA games we've made today. So I love them. But I can see also why, especially with the Nintendo Direct they did last week, and there was just all these slew of indie games, why a lot of people are going like, wait a minute, like, what about the big Nintendo titles though? Like that's what we want too. I think you need a balance of the two.
Yeah.
And like, someone here mentioned that they're a great distraction while you're waiting for a AAA game. I think that like they can serve that purpose for a lot of people, where it's like I'm waiting for the next Metroid to come out. Until then, there's like probably 20 really solid indie games here that are really fun to play that I can sort of like get and dive into and spend time with until that comes out. And I think that's probably what Nintendo is using them for at the moment. It seems to me like that's kind of what their strategy is that they want to fill your plate with like a bunch of cool little games you can play until they launch their next big one. And whether or not they're appealing to PC gamers like specifically, I don't know. I'm sure that that's a byproduct of it, whether they are or not, is that they see Steam is like the model for Steam is so brilliant. It's been so successful. I don't know why Nintendo and other companies wouldn't try to copy that to some extent with their digital releases and digital content. But anyways, those are my thoughts on that. But
sweet. Yeah, that sounds about right. And it's pretty cool because the indie games are typically cheaper and they're shorter, right?
Yeah.
So you don't like, you dive into these big long games that have like this, 80-hour games, 80 hours, 100 hours of content. And in between those, I sometimes don't feel like jumping back into another game that's going to take me 100 hours to finish. I want to kind of, it's almost like a palate cleanser. Also, these games look the way that I think games should look. Most of them are pixel art. Most of them are side-scrolling or top-down or three-quarters, but rarely are they, immersive 3D open world games. Typically, they're just the way games were made on SNES, which is what we all want Final Fantasy to go back and do and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool that these teams that are smaller, about probably smaller than the size of the teams that made the games that we love so much, right? But those games are made by smaller teams compared to today. And they're basically doing everything the way games were being done. And they're really cool. Like I talk over and over about Golf Story. I still think Golf Story is one of the best games that I've played like all of last year, not just the best like indie game. Like It was a really legitimately good game. So I've seen some people on the internet who are expecting a Super Smash Brothers announcement, and instead it was the indies. And I think that's where a lot of the, negative passion is going right now, is like, Nintendo, you should announce Waluigi or something dumb like that. And the fact they didn't do it. But this one was just focusing on the indies. Like every Nintendo Direct, people think Nintendo's going to show them everything they have in the future, but it's like no, they focus on different things. This time it was indies.
Something
Don't
specific.
Get so upset. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a Gamma Tross asking something here I thought was interesting. Do you think companies like Square Enix should take indie developers under their wing to make games for their franchises like some indie Final Fantasy games?
Yes, however, I'd rather those indie developers just keep making the games themselves. Like, it would be cool to have more money, but that extra cash and being with Square Enix and having a producer over your head telling you what to do, that can actually kind of ruin what these guys have going for them.
I think it worked really, really well for Sega when they brought on that guy to do Sonic Mania, right?
Yeah.
Like that was brilliant. Really that was brilliant. That worked out super well. So I think that yes, they probably should try and do that to sort of appeal to their older fan base, people that sort of want a return to the way that games were made when we were young, while also allowing their sort of like internal teams to work on sort of the future, like the future vision of the property or whatever it is. I think that's actually a really smart move, and it worked out super well for Sega. So there's no reason why it couldn't work out for people like us who have become indie developers or whatever, and we've got a couple of cool projects under our belt, and then they hand you a Final Fantasy project and they say like work on this, and you're like, yeah, like this is the way Final Fantasy games used to be made. And it was funny because Sega released 2 Sonic games around the same time. There was Sonic Mania, and then there was Sonic Forces, I think it was. And Forces was just completely like lambasted, and everyone
that was the
hated
one that
it.
They made with all their expensive people.
Yeah, and then Mania was a super huge success. So there's something to be said about the fact that sometimes companies have lost sight a little bit of what made the thing great to begin with, and the fans who grew up with it, who just love it to death, they understand it sometimes better than the company themselves does, or the company themselves do. So I don't know. I think it's a good idea. Overall, I think that it can work out. We have proof that's worked out. But at the same time, like you said, I kind of also want to see original titles from these people rather than sort of like going to Square Enix and developing one of their IPs. It's like, no, man. But at the same time, that can also be used as a tool to sort of like boost their career, right? So say you had worked on a really cool original indie title and no one ever heard of it, but then you go work on Final Fantasy, people like are introduced to you, and then you make an original. It's like, oh, like you've gained a fan base from that Final Fantasy game you made. I'm sure that the same is true for the guys that made Sonic Mania, right? Like their careers post that game are going to be helped by the fact that they did work on a really large and well-known intellectual property.
Whenever people come on to like these Kickstarters, or they're like, hey, we're making a video game, and they usually bring someone on with industry experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, with that Mega Man, I can't remember what it was called.
Mighty Number 9.
Yeah, Mighty Number 9. They were like, hey, we've got this guy who used to work on the Mega Man games, so this is going to be good because of that. I feel like to some extent, that's right. Having people who have a following, have people who know their name. But at the same time, I feel like that's I don't like that also. I feel like I don't know. I like these guys where it's like Stardew Valley. Like this was the first game he ever made. He made it from scratch, and that's kind of what he came up with. And it'd be pretty cool to go to a company, get experience, just so that you can get more money on Kickstarter, or just so that people know you get a following, you can actually get some traction. But I haven't. My experience is that those games haven't been as good, I suppose.
Mm.
At least the ones that are advertised like that.
Yeah. So another part of this question this was asked by Hat89 as a separate question, but I felt kind of like worked within the same vein of what we're talking about here. I'll just kind of read what he said. We've had an explosion of fantastic retro-inspired RPGs that capture the aesthetic or the vibe of the classics, in which we love. And in terms of gameplay, I would argue exceed quite a few of the classics, but none of them come even close in terms of telling a compelling story. Do you think it is that difficult to tell an enjoyable and memorable story, or are developers just prioritizing nostalgia over quality storytelling? Why do you think that is? It's strange because one of the reasons I hate AAA gaming sometimes is because they prioritize graphics or the premise of a story, and yet I find this same philosophy in many of these retro-inspired games. Sure, the aesthetic is beautiful, but often the story is bland and boring with a few rare exceptions. So I just want to say, I think we just got a super chat. Let me take a look at that.
We did. Otako Junpei. Thank you very much. $5.
Says, gotta go. Love your podcast, though. Have a good day, and thank you very much for your support of the channel. You're a beast.
You know, so nobody does this. People do super chat, and then they just say something like, you guys are awesome, and that's sweet. Thank you so much. So cool. But you guys know you can use this as an opportunity. We will read all super chats that come in. You can use it as an opportunity to get our attention and to have us read something you say.
Sure.
You know, on our podcast.
Ask us.
Just making sure everyone knows that.
Yeah, as an extra part of the question, or to elaborate, or have us look at something that your angle on it or whatever. So yeah.
But Junpei, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so yes, I just want to say to Hat, it really is that hard to tell a good story. Storytelling is not a simple thing. It is an art form. It is incredible the amount of planning you have to do. You have to come up with so much. You have to come up with the whole world that you're operating inside of, characters. What are the characters' arcs? You have to write your dialogue well. There's just so much that goes into it. Speaking as someone who's been working on the same book for 16 years straight, and who continually finds problems with it and goes, oh crap, like that's not going to work, and has to, like, I've been working on one story for 16 years and it's still not there yet for me. So it's not easy. It is not easy by any stretch of the imagination to make a good story. And I think when you're making a game, generally speaking, and it makes sense to me, what's more of a priority for these people is the fact that the game itself works, that it makes sense, that there's no bugs, that like it's not broken, that when people buy it, they'll be able to finish it. Just getting the thing to work and making sure that it's fun and enjoyable, I think, is almost always the priority, and it probably should be. So that, I think, is more the priority. Now, what you said about graphics, you know, like graphics being a priority, that's more of like a marketing angle, I think. It's like if you can make it look great, like more people will be enticed to buy. So it's like the game's got to work, it's got to be fun, you got to make it look great so that people will buy it. And
then you got to sell it. Yeah. Then you got to market it.
And so, yeah, I mean, it really is just that hard to tell a good story. I mean, how many movies have you seen in your life? How many books have you read in your life? How many games you've played in your life? And how many of those, of just like the entire, everything that you've seen, were like really, really great stories? How many movies have you seen where you give it a pass because, like, well, the action was super awesome and like that's why I saw it. Like, that fight was so cool. That stunt was so awesome. The freaking CGI dogfight in space was super sick, and I love that. And you can look past certain things because of that. I mean, it's not easy. Like anything, it's not easy. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to like really think through everything and make it all gel together really well. So I don't think it's a AAA game problem, necessarily, like specifically just that, because I think that across the board, I mean, there are thousands and thousands of books published every year. You know, how many of those are like great stories? Really, like it's just difficult. It's hard and takes a lot of effort. So not a lot of people are going to find success with that, especially without having years and years of trying and failing and learning. And like with anything else, it takes time to develop the skill. So
yeah,
I don't know. I don't think
that's true.
Yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily a problem with the AAA game industry specifically, so much as it is that they have other priorities, and then on top of that, they got to try and do something that's really tough and make that work. So
Yeah.
it's hard to
Good.
expect every game to have a great story. It's really not realistic.
But
um,
some games are like they're self-contained. Like your video on Hyper Light Drifter today, pointing out the way that you go and talk to people, and there's no dialogue, there are no words.
yeah,
It is just images that you see, and like that's an effective storytelling mechanism. It's very effective, but it's minimal. It's
yeah,
very simple. It's simplistic, and it's almost like people are well, gosh, how do I put it? It's almost like these indie games that we love, that we've been loving on, right? They're just like they have simple stories that they're telling in a simplistic way, whereas some of these AAA games, they're trying to tell a AAA story,
yeah.
and that's way harder. Sometimes it's like, hey, just tone that down a little and have some fun gameplay, and that'll be fine. Which is what a lot of these indie games are doing. I haven't seen a ton of like I've seen some really good stories, but they're simple. They're always simple. Even Owlboy, which is like a really, really, really cool and really well done. It's very simple in their presentation. And so I feel like there's a little bit of a mix up at the AAA level of, oh, our graphics are this good, which means the story presentation and complexity and everything about it needs to be at that same level. And maybe it doesn't always.
Sure. I'm always a huge proponent of simplifying a story rather than
Yeah.
trying to go like too insane and
Yeah.
then getting tripped up on remembering like, oh yeah, this, and oh yeah, I didn't factor this
Yeah,
in.
that's
And
where plot holes develop. Yeah.
it's really, really hard. We got Raven M here, super chat says, do
Ooh.
you think we'll ever get Chrono Break?
Not as you saw it.
Probably not. I mean, it's not impossible though. Like, I'm sure that they could resurrect the Chrono franchise, Square Enix, and all the resources and the money that they have. I'm sure that they could. I just don't know if they trust that that name has quite the power to sell huge numbers. Now that's something they could hand to an indie developer, kind of like Sega did with Sonic. That could, I think that could fit really well. Probably better than Final Fantasy. I think that Chrono is something they could hand off to, because I think it's the guy who made Owlboy.
It's something the fans want. It's like a grassroots, like almost what's the word? Like a cult kind of following of people who played these games from a long time ago, and they want a new one, and Square won't give it to them. It's like they could just totally license that out to an indie dev.
Yeah. Like the guy, did you see the Chrono Break trailer that was like a mock-up, and it was made by the guy who did Owlboy? He did like the whole thing.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that, but I did see it.
So
it
yeah, like
cool.
if you like that guy made a great game in Owlboy. If you handed him the Chrono franchise or the intellectual property and said, "Hey, make a Chrono game," he could make something really, really, really good. I'm sure.
I think so. Yeah,
that could totally work. Anyways, thank you, Raven, for that question, and thank you for the super chat. Appreciate the support. Anyways, I think that just getting back to like the core of the question, for me, it's something that I think moves in cycles. It's kind of like all things in life. You do one thing too long, you get bored, and you want something fresh and something different. I feel like at this point, I've been looking at and focusing so long on AAA games and have become disenfranchised, I guess, to a certain extent, with the way that the upper management, the corporate level sort of like messes with the artistic part of it, and everything being so big and bombastic, it starts to sort of like lose its impact and effect. And so I'm sure that I'll probably move more into indie games here in the near future and just like focus on that for a while. But I'm sure after a certain amount of time, I'll start kind of getting bored with that too, and I'll want something bigger and something, you know, like on a larger scale. And so I think it's something you can kind of swing between, and using it kind of like, as someone here in the comments suggested, as a big AAA game comes out, you play through that, and then while you wait months for the next one you're interested in, you sort of like dig into these indie games, and that sort of helps you like pass the time to the next big release. That's probably a good way of doing it, and gives you like a really healthy and balanced sort of like diversity in different kind of games that are out there, and can kind of keep you from getting burned out on anything in particular. So It's probably a good way to do it. All right. Thank you for that question, Sir Spur. Appreciate you. The next one is coming from Hat89 as well. It says, if you could know anything for a fact about a particular game's development history that is currently not known, or a mystery, what would be most interesting for you to know? I love this question.
It's did Tetsuya Nomura really want Final Fantasy 15 to be a musical?
There you go. That's a good one.
Real? Is that super real, or was it like a joke, or did it actually not even happen? Did he want that game to be a musical? That's probably like the biggest question. But that's mostly just like I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
Okay.
There's probably better things to know about games development. But that's the one. I can't get that out of my head. That can't be real.
So here's one that I am really curious about. I said this, I think, a couple weeks ago, but I'm kind of rewriting my Final Fantasy review series, doing better research on them and restructuring them for a future release. And I was kind of digging into Final Fantasy IV, and it's I don't know if well known is the right word, but it's become known on a wider level that when they started development after Final Fantasy III, they started working on 2 games simultaneously. They started work on Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy V at the same time. Mm-hmm. Now, Final Fantasy V was a Super Nintendo project. The one that we know right now as Final Fantasy IV. That was going to be Final Fantasy V. And they were working on a Famicom project, an NES project, Final Fantasy IV, simultaneously. They were going to do 2 games at once. So there was a screenshot of, an alleged screenshot of that Final Fantasy IV Famicom project that was released in a Japanese magazine. That touted the return of the class system. There was a whole article written on it, talking about like these classes that were going to be in it that were really strange. There was like a cook, or like I can't remember, like someone who cooks food. That was like a class they were claiming was one of the classes in the game. So, anyways, there was an account. I think it was an interview with Sakaguchi where he said, "Oh, that game didn't even really make it out of basically pre-production phase. Like, it was still kind of on the drawing board. We didn't really do anything with that. We canceled it really early on." And then there was another person, I forget the name. I'm terrible with names in general, but especially Japanese names, who used to be like part of Square's PR, and said, it kind of corroborated that same account, saying like, yeah, that screenshot, not only was the game canceled super early in development, but that screenshot was completely mocked up by that magazine company. Like, that wasn't actually a real screenshot from the game. They were just completely speculating on what it might be like. And so then I was reading another post where somebody was saying, hold on, there's an interview with Famitsu, or if it wasn't Famitsu, it was another popular, like, Super Nintendo focused game magazine at the time. There was this article there where they were talking to Sakaguchi, and it was during the marketing phase for Final Fantasy VI, actually. And they asked him about the Famicom FF4, like, what was the deal with that? And apparently, he says in that interview, no, it was actually closer to 80% complete, that Famicom game. It was like really far into production, but I lied and said that we had basically done nothing on it. Now, if that's true, I wouldn't be surprised about it, because Sakaguchi conflicts himself all the time in interviews. He does it all the time. Yeah. Like, he originally said the reason they called the game Final Fantasy to begin with was because he was giving it, like, the game industry a last chance. This is the last game I'm personally going to make, and if it's not successful, I'm going back to college. So he called it he said that in an interview. I have it, like, freaking saved in my freaking Chrome or whatever. But then in 2015, he comes up with an account that says, no, I mean, we were in dire straits. The company wasn't doing super well or anything. But the reason it's called Final Fantasy is because we wanted to make a game that could be abbreviated to FF, which sounds nice to the Japanese ear. And it's like, it could have been anything. We were originally thinking Fighting Fantasy, but there was another sort of like a board game series in Japan that used that name at the time. So we're like, okay, we want to avoid copyright, so we'll use Final Fantasy. But it had nothing to do with it being the last game that they could make. It had nothing to do with the company being on the verge of bankruptcy. Nothing like that. We just wanted a game that could be called FF.
That's so like ridiculous.
So he contradicts himself like that across interviews. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was true. However, that article, I can't actually find the magazine issue number where that appeared, where that interview actually happened. So I don't know if he actually did ever say, yeah, we were 80% complete on this Famicom version of FF4. So I would want to know that, I think. Because I would love to like discuss this in the new version of the FF4 video I'm going to put out. But it's just, I don't actually know whether or not they had ever gotten out of the pre-production phase and had actually done some development on Final Fantasy IV and Famicom, or if they didn't. And I would really like to know that for just my own video sake. But
that's insane. 80% done. That's like,
I know.
What's that Star Fox game that they just barely released?
Star Fox 2.
NES
yeah.
Classic. Yeah. That game was basically done. And Nintendo was like, no, we don't
not going to release it at all. Exactly.
Oh my gosh, I would want to play that other Final Fantasy.
I know, me too. And so like it would be freaking fascinating to kind of see if they had gotten that far. But anyways, that's one piece of trivia I really wish I knew about. But I think I'll have to talk to the man himself if that ever happens, if I'm actually going to find the answer to that. All right. Thank you. Or did you have something beyond Tetsuya Nomura's
No,
musical?
I mean, that was basically it. But my thing is, like, I want to know the history of all video games, right?
That's
and
true.
I have run into a few different things because I have not recently, but I have worked on, at many points in time, a dark history series of going into the backgrounds of video games and stuff. And one of the things that fascinated me the most is probably the Yakuza connection to the video game industry, especially in the 1980s and thereabouts, and how to what extent, what specific video games. I do know for sure, like I can't remember. You guys have to watch the video. There were several games that were like, for sure, the Yakuza were like wheeling and dealing and, had all sorts of their hands in all sorts of things, specifically with pachinko. And that has affected like Konami and Sega. But specifically, which games did like the Yakuza like weasel their way into and out of? And honestly, Nintendo has a super shady history and has, at least in the past, been very well connected with the Yakuza. And when did that stop? Or did it stop? I don't know.
Which of our games are dirty is what you're asking.
Yeah, which of our games are just like filthy? And I honestly, I'd probably play them because that's historically awesome to me. And it's like, holy cow, this happened and the Yakuza are totally messed up. Or that one story that I told from John Shishpaniak's novel where this one game company kidnapped like another rival game company employee's like sister and like held her captive in their offices. Yeah. First off, did that actually happen? And second off, who was that? Who was that? That's freaking insane. Yeah. So there's stuff like that I definitely want to know about.
Yeah, that would be fascinating to learn for sure. Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Hat, for that question. Good question. Let's move on here to Daniel Imperial, who asks, if Square Enix were to release a collection of 15 games in one cartridge for the Switch, which games would you want them to put on the collection? Anything's fair game as long as the Switch can handle it.
Is this just like another way of saying what are your top 15
Square Enix games? Well, because we had done a ranking of their PlayStation 1 games a few weeks back, but this could include anything up to, I guess, even something as recently as like Nier Automata, as long as Nier Automata could work on the Switch. I guess Dragon Quest XI too, since they are planning to bring that to the Switch.
Yeah, that would.
So Their entire history from NES, even before that. Let's go back to the PC 88 series. Let's go for Will, the Death Trap. All the way back from there, all the way up to today. 15 games from Square. Square Enix, so I guess games that were published under Enix only could count, like older Dragon Quest games. But okay.
Christian Lopez said something that he says Final Fantasy 1 through 15, right? And that's actually
there you go.
that's actually because we're talking about a collection here, right?
Yeah.
If it's just what are your top 15 Square Enix games, I wouldn't say that. But as a collection, having every Final Fantasy ever made in one, like PlayStation 4 disc or something, PS5 probably.
No, it's got to be on the Switch. It's got to be on the Switch, according to the
Final
question.
Fantasy 15 will go mobile version. I guess it would have to be the Switch, huh? You can't possibly fit that on the Switch. Okay. Maybe just do what Satoru Iwata did and just compress it like crazy and get it to fit on the Switch. He could do it. I guarantee that he could do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that would be interesting, right? All the Final Fantasies on one.
All Final Fantasies in one place would be super cool.
I mean,
that would be a good idea. There was rumors?
I almost prefer that to a random collection of different games.
Weren't there rumors for the 30th anniversary of Final Fantasy that they were going to do that on one disc for the PlayStation 4? And it was like everyone was sold on the fact that they were going to have Final Fantasy 1 through. I don't know if the MMOs were rumored to count, but like something like 1 through 10.
Probably not.
Something that was all going to go on one disc. I would have freaking loved that.
I do remember that, actually. I remember that rumor.
That would have been so sweet. Okay, I'm sure that I'm going to miss something. And someone's going to call it out and be like, but what about this? You're probably right. Whoever you are, you're probably right. But it's hard to think of everything on the spot. So I would definitely pick Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy IX, for sure. Now, I don't know if I want to take up 5 slots out of the 15 on Final Fantasy games alone, but it's hard to pass up on 6, and it's hard to pass up on 4 for me. So I'd probably include those 5 Final Fantasy games. So Tactics, 7, 9, 6, and 4. I would definitely want Secret of Mana and Seiken Densetsu 3. And now we're up to 7. I would definitely want Terranigma, which was not necessarily a Squaresoft game. It was made by Quest, I think. Or I think so. Anyways, but it was published by Enix in Europe. So I'm counting it. So Terranigma, just because I love that game so much. So that's 8. Xenogears would be 9. Yeah, it gets hard from there. It gets hard because, like, Vagrant Story is great. I'd probably pick Vagrant Story.
Yeah, probably.
What are we up to now? 10? Or is that 9? Can't remember. I'm trying to think of all the older games and then balance that out with, like, what are the newer ones I'd put?
Some more recent ones.
I'd probably put Bravely Default. I really, really liked Bravely Default. Again, not made by Square, but published by Square, so I'm counting it. Chrono Trigger, of course, that's my favorite game of all time. So we got to put Chrono Trigger in there. I'd probably include Cross as well, because I like Cross.
Yeah, what about like Xenogears? Oh, you already have that.
I picked that, so I think I'm up to 11. Let's see. I think I have to like write this down. I can't like freaking. Hold on, I'm gonna make a comment, but this is just.
Stan is saying Super Mario RPG.
Oh, you know what? Okay, hold on. FF Tactics.
For sure be on there.
Dang it! I didn't want to actually post that. I wanted to do Shift Enter so I could like make a list. Okay, I can't do it that way. I'm gonna do it in our document here instead. FF Tactics, FF7, FF9, FF, what am I on? 6, FF4, Terranigma, Xenogears, Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross. That gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What else did I say so far? Did I say another game?
Oh, geez. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Okay, that's 9. Hold on. I gotta see what other people are saying to remind me of games by Square. Oh, yeah, Super Mario RPG. I would definitely put that on there. Great game. That's 10.
Classic.
Okay. Oh, Vagrant Story. That was the other one I said. Vagrant Story. Yes, Quintet. Yes, I know that it was developed by Quintet. I said Quest, and you're right. I meant Quintet. Different people. Quest made Ogre Battle. Yeah, I've got Vagrant Story on there, Rob. I've got Super Mario RPG on there, Alex. World of Final Fantasy, I probably would not include. I'm sorry.
Probably not.
It's a good game, but I probably would not put it on the top 15. I got Xenogears.
Have you by chance finished
Kingdom Hearts?
Oh, Kingdom Hearts, sure.
Kingdom Hearts, I think, belongs. Kingdom Hearts 1.
The first one. Yeah, absolutely.
I think should go on it.
And possibly 358 over 2 days, but I don't know if you want to use.
I'm not going to use a slot for that. I'm going to pick one game. Even though 358 is my favorite, I think Kingdom Hearts 1 is probably a better choice overall.
Sure. And also, have you by chance finished Project Octopath?
I haven't finished it. I'm still in Chapter 3.
Well, I mean, I haven't either, but I'm just saying, maybe you want to finish it before you put it in a list like this, but...
Yeah, I'd probably want to finish it first. But it is good. I do like it. Let's see. People keep saying Secret of Evermore. It's good. It's not on the level of these other games. I'm sorry. It's not that good. It is good, but it's not that good. Dissidia, I'm tempted because I really like Dissidia. I really like Dissidia. Sure. I should probably put a Dragon Quest game on there. So I'm gonna say Dragon Quest 8.
8, yeah. That's good.
So that gets me
a lot of people
1,
are saying
2,
12
3,
is
4,
a really
5,
good
6,
year. 11.
9, 10,
a lot of people saying 11 is a great game, though. We have Dragon Quest 11 now, by the way. We will be talking about it. We just haven't played it yet.
Okay, I'm at 11. 11 games out of 15. So we got Dragon Quest, Kingdom Hearts, Vagrant Story, Super Mario RPG, Chrono Cross, Chrono Trigger, Xenogears, Terranigma, even though you know what? Terranigma doesn't count. I gotta take that off. That doesn't freaking count. It's published by Enix in one territory. It's not.
Oh, really? Oh, that's funny.
Okay, so we're at 10. FF Tactics, FF7, FF9, FF6, FF4, Xenogears, Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, Super Mario RPG, Vagrant Story, Kingdom Hearts, Dragon Quest 8. Okay. What about stuff from recent? Oh, I said Bravely Default, didn't I? I said that once.
You did say Bravely Default.
That one does count, because that one was published by Square Enix everywhere. People keep saying Brave Fencer Musashi. I haven't finished it, so I can't speak for it. Valkyrie Profile, I have also not finished, but I do like it somewhat. I love the style of the graphics, for very least, for what it's worth. Okay, well, I could probably put more Final Fantasy games on this now.
Hey, just start putting them on.
FF10.
Oh, and I did think of something.
What'd you think?
Oh, gosh, it was more recent. I can't remember what it was, though. Ah, dang it. Might have been something that someone else mentioned.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14. Oh, we're at 14. We just need one more game. Just need one more game. What's that one Square game I'm just not thinking of right now?
Is it newer?
Well, I don't know, because I'm not thinking of it is the problem. Nier or Nier Automata, I think, would be good choices. I personally wasn't like the biggest fan of Nier Automata. Automata, whatever the freak it's supposed to be pronounced.
Oh, Star Ocean. That's what I was going to bring up. But I remember you did.
Oh, yeah.
You weren't as enamored with that game as I
didn't
was.
love Star Ocean 2, but I did really like
fun.
what I played of Star Ocean 1. I thought that was pretty good, but I haven't finished either game. I can't really speak for them. Romancing Saga I've not beaten. Front Mission I've dabbled in Front Mission 2, but I haven't beaten them. I did not like The World Ends With You, and I'm sorry, Christian Lopez, because I know that's your freaking avatar. You got what's his name, Nico or what's his name from?
I only remember him from Dream Drop Distance, but I can't remember his name.
Anyways, the lead guy from The World Ends With You. I didn't love it that much.
Yeah.
Personally. Bravely is not better than Secret of Evermore. I disagree. I think Bravely Default is amazing. Okay. A lot of good suggestions from people.
We're scraping at the bottom of the barrel now.
A lot of good stuff that I just haven't beaten, so I can't speak for it. So I'm going to put Dissidia.
Sure.
That's my choice, because I really loved... I'll say Dissidia Duodecim, specifically. All right, so my list is Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy IV, and Final Fantasy X. That's 6 Final Fantasy games. Xenogears, Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, Super Mario RPG, Vagrant Story, Kingdom Hearts, Dragon Quest VIII, Bravely Default, Dissidia Duodecim. That's what I would choose as my 15 games on a Square collection.
That sounds pretty good.
Okie doke. I think honorable mentions would be like Legend of Mana, which I think is super good.
Oh, yeah, very good.
Could maybe squeeze in there in the place of Dissidia if I think about it long enough. But that's my choice. Take it or leave it. Hate on me in the comments if you feel the need to do so.
Sounds good. There's a couple, like I might take Dissidia or Bravely Default out, mostly because I never played those, and put in something like Star Ocean 2, because that game's freaking incredible.
Yeah, Amanqua is upset at my choice of Dissidia on a top 15 list of Square games. And
how dare you, Mike?
I understand why, because the story is complete and utter garbage in Dissidia. It's really bad. But that game is so much fun to play. Like, I want to say I put at least 500 hours into Dissidia. I played that game a lot. I really, 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 really liked playing it just as a game. It's one of the few games where it has a terrible story and I didn't care. That almost never happens for me. If the story's like super bad, I get disinterested and I leave. And I loved the combat in Dissidia. I freaking loved it. So that's what it is. You get what you get, don't throw a fit.
Yeah. I know you're not as big into them, but I'd also probably put Persona 4 or 5, or probably 5.
Well, those aren't Square games. Those are Atlas.
That's right. Those are Atlas.
Yeah.
Y'all is also saying you don't have any Saga games. What's your problem?
Because I haven't played them. I have not played them. I have played probably about 2 hours of Romancing Saga 2 because it was released on the Switch, but I don't think it's that good. Like, Romancing Saga 2 is a competently made game from that era, but there was nothing about it that like grabbed me in a big way. Yeah. Now, from what I've seen in terms of consensus, when you look at like Metacritic or like game rankings, the Saga Frontier games on the PS1 are also rated pretty averagely at about like 70-ish%. And from what very little I've seen of them, I don't think that I would like them that much. Suikoden is a great choice, but it's not a Square game.
Yeah.
It's made by Konami. This is only Square properties. So anyways, I probably could have squeezed in another Dragon Quest in place of Dissidia or something like that. Maybe like Dragon Quest 5, or if Dragon Quest 11 is as good as people are saying it is, maybe Dragon Quest 11. Nier or Nier Automata, I think, are two also really good choices that could find their way in there, and I would totally understand. Parasite Eve, a lot of people mentioning that. I have not played Parasite Eve at all. Anyways, a lot of people making some good choices here for games that I unfortunately have not played. And now I have not beaten Dragon Quest VIII, but I've played it enough, I feel, to where I could say confidently that it's really, really solid, and I would pick it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. I just got a notice from Skype. Let's get that out of the way. Okay, this one comes from Michael Butler. For whatever reason, I've been reminiscing a lot recently about transportation methods in RPGs. Whenever trying to think of my favorite examples, I always come back to some of the Golden Age Final Fantasies, 4, 6, 7, and 9 in particular. Those are my 4 favorites, man. We're on the same page. I realize I can't come up with any recent examples that I even find particularly notable. Do you think I may be blinded by all the powerful nostalgia glasses? And if so, can you give some shout-outs to transportation systems that make the world seem expansive and like you can explore everywhere you want, even if it may just be an illusion? Side note, while I love FF12, I was horribly disappointed that a game whose main character's dream was to become a sky pirate, and where the 2 of your party members are actual sky pirates, the player never gets an airship. Okay, so there's a couple things I want to say about this. Kind of 2 angles I want to approach this from. I did a video a couple months back. It was called Why Open World Games Feel So Small to Me.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take this into like an open world discussion area as much as to say that in that video I talked about how the philosophy behind the way games are made. I have something in my throat. Excuse me. Take a sip of water here. Okay, so the way that games were made when we were kids is very different from the way games are made now, right? They try to make the world more of a one-to-one in terms of scale on a map while you're exploring it, like trees and buildings and architecture and roads, and you're kind of traversing the world in a more realistic one-to-one fashion in terms of scale. Whereas, especially a lot of the RPGs we grew up with had overworld maps, which was an abstraction where the character was as large as the mountains and larger than the cities themselves, like a Godzilla guy running around on the map. Yeah. But the idea was just put in place because there were limitations at the time from what the hardware could, and even like what could fit into the memory of a cartridge, right? There was a limit on how many assets they could put into there. So they used that as an abstraction to make it, to give the idea you're traveling really far. See the difference between this map or for this town here that you're at and this town over here? Like on this scale, it's something like 50 miles. But you can traverse that really quickly because your guy's all huge. You got these huge freaking, what do they call them in Japanese? The huge monsters.
Oh, like
Godzilla. What do they call them?
Yeah, I used to know. My
kaiju?
Kaiju, that's it. Kaiju.
Your character is a freaking kaiju running around on the world map. Anyways, so it lended itself really well to the kinds of like cool vehicles and things like that, where you get an airship and you're kind of just cruising around the whole world, like flying circles around it. And in like this open world design in one-to-one scale design, you don't see that as often. And what is the reason for that? I don't know specifically. I know that part of it has to do with rendering. They perform a lot of tricks, especially for games that really push their hardware. Let's say a game like Horizon Zero Dawn or something like that, right? Graphically, very impressive game. If you could like get up in the air and just like whoosh, like take off and like all the assets it has to load along the way, that could be a reason why it's tough to like make that work. Because like it's now at the same time, I've also seen tricks though, where when you're high above the ground, say in an airship or something like that, they render all the assets in a really, really low resolution. Like the textures are not loaded in their 4K textures. It's because you're not seeing it up close. So they're able to like sort of like have a gradient for to tell the engine like when to load the high resolution textures versus the low resolution textures when you're far away from something, and like draw distance and all that stuff. Like there's kind of just a lot, I think, that has to go into like telling the engine what it should load and how much of it should load, that keeps it from overloading in like big AAA games like we have today, that can probably make it tough to have like a vehicle that like zooms you through an environment really quickly like that. I don't know for sure if that's the case, but I would think that that could be one reason why you don't see it quite as often these days as you did back in the day. But I don't really know. I don't know for sure, like, why we've stopped seeing like awesome airships and vehicles. Like Final Fantasy VII had so many vehicles in it. Like you had the buggy that you get from the gold saucer. You had the tiny Bronco. You had the main airship. Final Fantasy, I think,
the airship crashes and it turns into a water ship for a little while.
Yeah, the tiny Bronco. Yeah.
Then it's like a boat.
The plane. Final Fantasy 3 had like a submarine, like 2 different kinds of airships. One that was like freaking humongous and had like shops and like an inn inside of it, and like another one that was like a normal one. It had like a regular boat, like a sailing boat. Yeah, a lot of games used to have like tons and tons of cool vehicles to travel around the world and get you around quickly. And like Final Fantasy 12, I think, is a good example. I remember I talked to you about this, I think, once, about how like, why can't we fly a freaking airship? And I didn't use the airships. That's what it was. Because you can get on airships.
They're pretty
in
cool.
FF12, but you don't control them. They're sort of like commercial.
They're commercial lines. And it's funny because you can get there quicker on the map than you do using the airship. Actually takes longer than just opening up the map and going wherever you want. So there's a weird element of like, I don't know how much time it takes. It's different from every other game.
Yeah. Now, here's another thing about, at least specifically Final Fantasy. The way that their maps were designed from FF10, like in the PS2 era, essentially, was that they were all broken up into zones. And so, like, if you were in an airship, they're not connected in the same way that, like, an overworld map connects everything. So you couldn't just like fly over all of these areas because of just their separate zones. They're loaded separately, and so they're not connected in a way that would make any sense to do that. However, I think you could probably still have worked in something like a buggy or some kind of car sort of thing to sort of drive over it. I think of maybe like Halo vehicles. The Warthog and even like the little flying one, where you drive it to like the end of the zone and then it would like load a new zone or something like that. Maybe they could have worked that in somehow as a quicker way to get around. But I just think more or less like the reason why we don't see that quite as often anymore is because the way worlds are built in games today isn't really close to the same as the way they were built back then. It doesn't really lend itself necessarily very easily into the idea of an airship, which you would need like a completely connected, almost open world, kind of like Final Fantasy 15 has, right? Like you can, your car can turn into an airship and fly around in that world, and everything's connected. So it would work in that sense, and it does work, I think, in FF15. The only problem with flying in FF15 is landing is kind of tricky.
Yeah.
And you can crash and die and then like lose
progress.
I know
you can actually take damage. And it's like, yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know. I do agree with you though. It used to be like super cool when you get an airship in a game. That was like one of the coolest moments.
That's the funniest thing. Like in Final Fantasy 15, it's harder. Like going out around in an airship is almost like going around in an airship in real life. I mean, not all that close, I guess, in terms of how hard it would be. But in terms of the scale, it's like, whoa, this isn't actually as fun as I thought it would be. And when you're on an overworld map where it's basically just a representation and you're not actually controlling the thing everywhere and landing and all the difficulties there, then it's actually cooler because you're you can kind of figure out how that went in your own mind. I think the best open worlds are like the 3D world map ones, like the Final Fantasies, and Star Ocean 2 has a really cool overworld too.
I think that another issue is that like fast travel became a thing. So like vehicles in older games were used to get you from place to place faster.
Yeah.
And now we have fast travel. So it's like if I can just
don't do that anymore, yeah.
I just click on the place and go there, like what's the point of getting in an airship and flying there if I can just go there immediately? So I think that has something to do with it.
I don't like fast travel very much. I know a lot of people do. But I like stuff like the Wind Waker, honestly, where it's just you're going to a new place and it takes a while. So buckle up. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Anyways, I don't actually know the reason. I'm speculating on reasons. Maybe one of those is close to true. Let me know.
Yeah, well, the more in video games, I think the more you can approach a representation of what you're talking about, as opposed to the real thing. Sometimes the more like a book it becomes, the more it leaves up to the video game player's imagination. And I think that's usually a good thing. If you're filling in all the gaps in their imagination, then you're doing yourself a disservice, because you're going to have a more passive audience as opposed to a more active, engaged audience in terms of their imagination.
Yeah. So yeah, I think a combination of it's probably a pain, it's a hassle to like figure out how to get the engine to load assets correctly when you're going that fast through an environment. Not impossible. I mean, we see it a lot. Final Fantasy 15 did a fine job of it. But what I'm saying is that there's probably a lot of time and effort that goes into making that seamless, to where you can take off, fly up high, and then land in another place and load all those assets in a way that doesn't like totally jack the whole thing. So I think that setting up a system like that is probably just a lot of work. But then in addition to that, for a long time, the way that zone construction sort of took over overworlds, they weren't connected anyways. So outside of having a warthog to drive you to the end of the zone, you couldn't just fly seamlessly into the next zone.
Right.
So that's probably led to a reason why we saw a decline in that as well.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that question, Michael. Appreciate it. This is our last one for the day. This one comes from Arnicles. Last week's podcast, when Christopher Ewan's question was discussed about an FF4 movie alongside the discussion of diversity in movies, got me brainstorming. There was a live-action FF4 movie, or if you want to go further in discussion, some of your other favorite FFs made into movies. Who are some actors you would cast as characters in these FFs? How would real-life ethnicity play into this? For example, would Yuna's actress be Caucasian, Asian, or perhaps mixed ethnicity? So I'll say this first. I think every Final Fantasy post Final Fantasy VII should not be live action.
Sure.
The hair does not work in live action. I'm sorry, it does not. Cloud's hair will never look good in live action. Freaking like Wakka's hair will never look good in live action ever. Yeah. Even like Final Fantasy 15's hairdos, like it just would not look good in live action.
Difficult. Well, even Zidane in Final Fantasy 9, I mean, he has that like up and down. You would just part it in the middle. It wouldn't look as cool for a real person.
I think that anime characters should stay anime characters. They should not be turned into real life people. So that solves half of the problem about ethnicity, because say like Cloud in Advent Children, right? I don't love Cloud's design in FF7 Advent Children. I think that he looks kind of weird. But it is harder to tell ethnicity in that CGI character. Like he does have like elements of him that do look a little bit more Asian, and then others that look a little bit more Caucasian or whatever it would be.
Yeah, I guess they did that on purpose.
You can keep people more like racially androgynous. Is that a word?
Well,
is there a word for that?
No.
If it's
there
CGI.
Is a word. It's racial ambiguity, something like that. What was it?
Anyways, yeah,
there is a word for it, but
when it's CGI, it's a lot easier to kind of like you're not exactly sure, and people can look at it and see maybe their own ethnicity in the character or whatever it is. That's probably a better way to go. That being said, if you're going to bring up Yuna specifically from FF10, since that entire culture is inspired by Okinawa, I do think at least mixed race would probably be a good way to go if you were to go live action with Yuna and a lot of the characters in Spira in FF10. So I think that would probably be a good way to go, and especially if Titus, or Titus, whichever you prefer, coming from a long time ago, was maybe a little bit, maybe if you had him be Caucasian or something like that, but like the people currently in Spira during the time period it's taking place in.
Oh, so kind of separate between the time.
Yeah,
period.
so it's like the cultures have evolved and changed over time. That might be a good way to go. I think that would make a lot of sense. But for the most part, I don't think those characters should be live action. I really don't. I think that would look very weird. Now, if we're going back to pre-Final Fantasy VII, I think those would work better. You're not hearing me as well? I think you're gone now. You're frozen. Yep, he's gone.
Breaking up. You're breaking up on me a little bit.
Okay, I think you're back now. Can you hear me?
My internet sucks right now. I'm sorry.
I think you're back. You're good.
Okay, good.
Okay, so
I mean, I heard most of what you were saying.
Pre-Final Fantasy VII, I think those stories would work a little better live action because they're not quite as well. If you look at the Amano art, you might question that because that's a little wild. But
yeah, those are not real-looking people.
I think it's a little bit easier to translate the character portraits and stuff from like FF6 or whatever. I think that they translate a little better. Now, green hair for Terra or something like that. Now, of course, she's...
Yeah, I know. You don't need to do much to show, oh, that's Terra. Like, it doesn't need to look exactly like the pixel art person, you know?
Yeah. So, but again, my stance on this is to cast unknowns. So if I'm going to cast anybody in a Final Fantasy movie or Netflix series or whatever, I would absolutely cast unknowns, people you have not seen before. So since I don't know them and you don't know them, I can't say who they are, but they would be the right person for the part.
Perfect.
That's who
I think for Final Fantasy IV, we're looking at something that has medieval themes, and you would probably cast people who look like they belonged in the medieval times and in that particular part of the world. So that would be European, French, English, German, I suppose. Probably, because I think that's what the game makers were going for. So I don't have much more to say about that. We did talk a lot about this last week, and some people left comments on the video that I read that were relevant, talking about how if something is made in Japan, that it should have a Japanese character, but some things that are made in Japan are not set in Japan, so they don't need, like, the question doesn't work. I don't think Japan wants to make media for only Japanese people. I think they would be perfectly happy with some of their content featuring a European cast. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, that being said, a lot of the anime that they make, when they do make a movie out of it, they hire Japanese people because it's all in Japanese. And that's fine too. And I even watch those. I think they're awesome. So it depends on who's making it, I guess. But were I to make it, I'd keep the medieval theme. I wouldn't try to mix the what do you call it? What's the Edo period? I wouldn't mix the feudal Japan with the medieval. I would just kind of go with the theme the way the game seems to be set.
I think in cases like Final Fantasy VI, you have like I just had his name and I forgot it. The samurai character.
Oh, sure.
What the freak? I thought of his name, but then I thought of Yang from Final Fantasy IV, who's like Chinese martial artist. Yes, I was going to say
Yang. Yeah, you can have a Tibetan kind of guy.
But then I forgot the name of the character from 6 as I freaking switched over to Yang. Someone's going to say it. Anyways, that guy, Final Fantasy VI samurai guy, could be Japanese for sure in Final Fantasy VI, I would think. And I think Yang in Final Fantasy IV could be like Chinese descent or Asian, and that would work really well.
Seven?
No, not Sabin. He's 6. I'm talking about the samurai guy from 6. Not the monk, but the samurai. Hold on, FF6 characters. People are disappointing me. They're not correcting me yet.
What the heck, people?
Okay, hold on. His name is Cyan. I wanted to say Saitan. I wanted to say Saitan, but that's from Xenogears. And I was like, that's not right. It's not Saitan. But it's something like that. It is with a C. I know it. So Cyan. Cyan from FF6. Matt Damon is Cyan, says Chocolate Rob.
Hey, if
that's freaking hilarious. Yeah, I think that Cyan should be Japanese in a live action version of FF6. I don't know. Like I said, I don't think I'd make any of these movies into live action.
No, this is a bad idea. I don't think Final Fantasy IV should be live action. It would be a sick, like, anime style show. It would be a sick cartoon or, TV show series. I don't know. It would be cool in many different ways. CG animated. Most of the Final Fantasies should be CG animated, not live action. That's how they should basically all be. And then in that case, just make them look the way that the artists made them look, and you can get away with it now because you don't need to find a person that looks like that.
Yep, just make them look how they look in the cartoon. Yep. Got yourself a good character. Easy. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thank you for watching.
Appreciate it.
If you are listening to this audio only, you can find our YouTube channel, Dark Pixel Gaming. We make videos outside of the podcast there, like the one I put up this week on Hyper Light Drifter. You should watch it.
You should watch it. It's a good video.
I liked it. I liked how it turned out. Additionally, if you're watching this live on YouTube or you're watching the video after we've quit the live stream, you can listen to it audio only. The links are in the description. I should have said this at the beginning. I'm trying to make it a habit to say at the beginning. You can skip to any topic you like via the description. We have time codes in the description, and you can skip only if you're on YouTube. If you're on audio only, I'm sorry. You just have to listen to the whole thing. I'm going to try and make a habit out of saying that at the beginning so people know they can skip around if they want to do that. And then also, for anyone who didn't hear at the beginning of the podcast, Lore Runner will be returning for next week's podcast. He's going to be our guest next week on Tuesday. So if you want if you have any particular topics you would like us to discuss with him, please let us know. Now, for those of you who follow Lore Runner's channel, you know that he has like a wide variety of things he talks about. He doesn't just talk about video games. He talks a lot about science fiction, Star Trek, and stuff like that. So Star Wars. If you want us to discuss movies or maybe like Star Trek or Star Wars with him, we can do that. If you want to talk about video games outside of JRPGs, he covers a lot of those sorts of things. So this is a good opportunity to expand or diversify what we talk about in the podcast a little bit. If you'd like us to branch out of just talking about Final Fantasy every single freaking week, we can do that with him. It'd be a good opportunity. So think about what you would like us to discuss with him and let us know. You can do so in the comments here on YouTube. If you reach out to me on Discord, that's a good place to reach me, or on Twitter. Links are in the description for all of this. Or if you're a patron, of course, we're going to look at Patreon first. So anyways, thank you, everybody, for watching. Have a great week, and we will see you again next time. Peace out.